Hello and welcome to today's discussion about gender and ethnicity pay disparity in the music industry. My name is Roger Wilson. I'm co-founder of Black Lives in Music, a new organization focusing on the issues of racial diversity in today's music industry. This is one of a number of fascinating sessions involving Black Lives in Music, sponsored by Tunecore, powered by Sound City and Guest House. The road to success in any industry involves talent, commitment, hard work, and some luck. The road to success in the music industry is at least as tough, but minus the obvious pathways. Add to that the ongoing issues for people of color, and the journey becomes more one of an odyssey, with violent twists and turns of fortune along the way. Earlier this year, Black Lives in Music commissioned a survey on the lived experience of Black music creators and industry professionals. The survey engaged with nearly 2,000 respondents. The subsequent report, now published, has produced key information and an insight into the Black experience in today's music industry. I talked to today's guests to discuss the findings of the report and to talk about what can be done to bring about change. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by the academic and legal specialist, Kienda Hoji. Kienda is currently the Assistant Head of the School of Arts at University of Westminster in London and Principal Lecturer in Music Law and Business. He's a music and entertainment lawyer, consultant, with over 30 years of experience in the global music industry, both at independent and major levels. Wozzy Brewster OBE is the founder and executive director of the MIDI Music Company, a music education and talent development charity. She supported the career development of a whole host of artists and creative entrepreneurs. Her attritional work ethic includes membership of the UK Music Diversity Task Force and consultancy with the BPI. Wozzy is an inductee into the Music Week Women in Music Awards, Roll of Honour 2018, and she's a free woman of the London Borough of Lewisham, incidentally, my old stomping ground. The multi-talented Kwame Kwaten is a British manager, music consultant, musician, and record producer. He owns an artist management and consultancy company called Ferocious Talent and is a co-founder of Creating Vision, a non-profit company that offers young people a range of educational programs, seminars, workshops, and opportunities in both the music and sport industries. Last but definitely not least, Kevin Legendre. He's an award-winning journalist, broadcaster, and author whose work focuses on Black music. He's deputy editor of Echoes magazine, has written for a wide range of publications, including Jazzwise, Music Week, and The Independent on Sunday. As a broadcaster, Kevin is regularly heard on BBC Radio and as a guest speaker at festivals and live events. To all of our guests, I wish you all a warm welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So I guess, Kwame, I'd like to come to you first. I wanted to go back to the beginning of, for me, where this problem starts, which is grassroots and talent development. I think this is an issue that really resonates with everyone on this call. My experience suggests that without initiatives like Creating Vision and Wozzy's the MIDI Music Company, young Black people are not getting enough of the opportunities to progress along the pathway to joining the industry. It feels to me that gender disparity starts there. How much do you see the issues of gender disparity at these younger ages?
Ooh.
Is that a curveball for you, Kwame?
No, not at all.
I didn't think it would be.
I just like to think before, because to be honest, yeah, I mean, definitely organizations like Wozzy's, you know, MIDI Music Company, organizations like Creating Vision, organizations like, I don't know, I Love Live, organizations, the simple truth is we were left to do it and almost prove that it was worthy of a place within the kind of, I guess, social enterprise space, you know? And we often had to prove why it was useful. And sometimes those lessons might take 5 years, 7 years to actually bear fruit. But our point was that you cannot just keep, if you're gardening, you can't just look at the flowers. You've got to look at the roots. and our thing was, it was all very well. We just constantly saw the music industry picking from the top, always picking from the top, going, oh, this is a lovely flower. So an artist would come along, they would somehow make it through to becoming a flower. The music industry would pick off the top, as it were. You know, the artist might have 2-3 years, and then without the music industry knowledge, without the support structure, without, suddenly within 5 years, the tax man's knocking at their door and they're wondering how come. And a lot of our things were literally just about just actually going, that's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem is down here.
Absolutely, I hear that.
In the soil. Right? So our thing was, we and I know Wozzy would have had one of these moments. I had the moment where I, for 1 minute, was going, you know, I'd walk into labels almost, and not just labels, but just organizations, and say, look, I really need, you know, can you start something like this? Can you start something like this? Can you start something like this? And then I realized, I was like, why am I asking somebody else to start this? Why am I've got, mate, come on. And I just went and found like-minded people, and we started it. And we just learned along the way.
Yeah,
you know?
sure.
And yeah, you know, it's put plenty of tax pounds back into the UK's economy. But the truth is with our organizations, and with more organizations like Wozzy's, and like, you know, just more organizations that basically have got the information, Black Lives in Music, that have got the information, Women in Control, that have got the information, right, necessary to actually, you know what, prove, look, there is a real issue here. Like 2020 didn't happen and then suddenly everything was okay. It's like, no, you know?
Yeah, I hear that. And I think that kind of brutal scenario that you describe, in terms of the way the industry kind of uses artists and then pushes them out, kind of perpetuates this feeling that actually, particularly when we're looking at musicians of color, creators of color in the industry, that actually there's something very disposable about them, and as a fact that you know, as a result, they can be treated that way. So I'm really thankful for that observation. And Wozzy, given the enormous work you've done in the area of talent development, I just wonder if I've got a funny feeling I'm not going to be able to stop you, but I just wonder if you wanted to add to that.
Well, yes, I can add. When Kwame's speaking there, really, it was taking me back to growing up with Maxi Priest and working at the Albany Theatre, at the Albany Empire, as a major music venue of the 1980s, and being a minority, one Black, one female on team, and another Black female who actually worked in dance. She was Ari Dance Theatre, who actually went off to do the first ever Black dance degree in the UK. But us actually championing Maxi Priest, you know, his mum and my mum knew each other. We grew up together with Martin, all the rest of it. And he was releasing his first album, and convincing the staff to let us run the night for this sound system, you know, Saxon sound system, Maxi Priest night, and that promised them it will go well, trust us. We know how to run these things. Do not be afraid of this type of night. You know, I grew up when Lucian Boys Club was here, when all the sound systems were coming out.
I remember that.
In the 70s and the 1980s. So I had come into a very creative space. I'm lucky to work where I grew up in Deptford, but having been international from the US to Mauritius. So looking at different kinds of structures and systems that there are for talent development. And we ran that night. His album came out, Maxi kind of blew up. But it took us, lucky enough that we were around the table, as Women in Control say, you know, got to be around that table to be able to to contribute and to have that voice, that we were able to host that massive night that helped that album to rocket out, for Maxi to go on and be that amazing Black artist out there and doing it and having his own studio in his house in Lewisham, and his brother Martin to come behind him and to develop artists. And I think it's very much that whole root of the beautiful flower that is like an oak tree, really, when we dig deep into the roots of the oak tree and we realise that actually it's going all over the place. There's a lot of stuff going on, but it's where, for this business, when we look at, as a Black female in the industry and other women of colour within this business, if you don't find yourself or you don't find an akin ally to your visions and your dreams, people want to pigeonhole you in certain ways. And therefore, if you don't have the strength of self or character or understanding of what you want to do in the business, I knew a long time ago I wanted to manage bands eventually, but I actually used to manage a music venue. And I was meeting lots of managers, and from Sade's to Jamiroquai, Bobby McFerrin, all of these people, that I was exposed to this music industry that I love with all my heart, and understood that myself, I didn't want to be a performer. I like a bit of stability. And I think that one of the things that certainly coming out of the data that you found is the fact that I had to have 3 jobs. I was a house manager, I was teaching drama and an administrator, and all those other little side bits to have some kind of form of stability. And if you haven't got a stable foundation to build the house, you're gonna be able, 3 little pigs are gonna come down and blow it down.
Absolutely.
So it's about that, you know, 3 little pigs are inside, but they can be outside and they'll blow it down because you haven't really got a good foundation. It's made of straw. Yeah. And I knew early that we needed to bridge the gap when we set up the MIDI Music Company between music education, wonderful players, wonderful artists, all the rest of it. But as Kwame said, if they don't know nothing about the business, about being self-employed, about paying your taxes, about how to register for your royalties, about what about your PPO, you've released recorded music and you're not on the performing rights. You have to understand all of this so that you can have a broader income stream that's coming in to feed you, for you to be the creative if you're the artist. If you're the business, where is the funding? Where is the this, the that for your enterprise development? What kind of structure of business do you want to set up? It's the knowledge and the power that people need to make the right decisions and right choices to be in this business, and also to recognize that actually it's not overnight. None of this, you know, for every young person that might watch this, every young person who's coming into this business or in the business now, all of that is not overnight. It's a journey that actually, just to be in the music industry, if you want to be in the music industry, you have to be consistent and persistent.
Thanks, Wozzy, and there's a real strong message there that it, you know, implies by definition that, you know, there's just a lack of support there, and I think you know, in terms of the industry itself, and it becomes incumbent on smaller communities and individuals to make those mistakes for themselves, find out as they're going along, and you know, I know myself in terms of that journey as a person of color. It's hard. It feels harder. You're in a space that's, you know, traditionally dominated by a different ethnicity. Thank you for that, Wozzy. Kevin, first of all, I have to just say how pleased I am that you continue to fly the flag for people of color in jazz media, an area of the industry that continues to lack adequate representation, meaningful representation. Given your research and subsequent writing, I wondered how much this issue of gender and pay disparity is steeped in historical racial stereotyping and the ensuing messaging of discrimination that accompanies such notions. So I guess I'm asking, is the UK music industry programmed to pay Black people less, to treat them differently?
I think historically, just about every music industry that you look at, especially in America, does the same thing, which is treating people of color, treating minorities, certainly women as well, as lesser beings. Unfortunately, the historical evidence is clear and incontrovertible. There's nothing that you can do to overturn that, I think, or to deny it rather. Hopefully we can overturn it. I think that what Kwame and Wozzy are saying, it really resonates with me, particularly this idea of development and the implication from that as well, being that there simply isn't enough guidance and enough really important education given to artists entering the industry. To go back to your question specifically, Roger, I think historical precedents, I mean, are really quite shocking if you're talking about, and let's be clear about this, the exploitation, you know, not just the use in inverted commas. I think in Kienda's really interesting report, he talks about product, artists being perceived and used as product. There's a large degree of exploitation that comes with that. I think women of color being down the pecking order, being seen first and foremost as ornamental objects, or I think being reduced to one particular function. So you're a woman, a black woman. What does a black woman do? First and foremost, a black woman either sings or dances. And that becomes a kind of overriding definition, as opposed to a black woman who composes, a black woman who writes, a black woman who arranges, a black woman who plays an instrument to a very high standard. These are realities. These aren't things that we can imagine. They exist. They have existed since time. And the question is whether those narratives are really put forward to enable to kind of pull the scales from people's eyes, so they realize that there is this quote unquote hidden history of very powerful black women in the music industry, but more importantly, empower new generations of black women coming into the industry as well. So in plain and simple terms, I've heard so many stories over the years of black women who aren't encouraged to write their own material, who aren't given the opportunity to take control of their careers, who are told, this is the plan that we have for you, rather than what do you want to do as a creative being? Kind of reduce, so it goes back to what I was saying before, reducing the black woman to something which is essentially ornamental. And it's very ironic. I mean, just recently, I think it was earlier this year or the end of last year, the film, which hopefully you all saw, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, told the story of this completely inspirational woman who did that, who did take control of her career back in the 20s. You know, this colossal talent who basically would not allow anybody to tell her what to do. She was the one who told producers and band leaders and her own musicians what to do, and who realized that she could sell records on the strength of her talent without anybody imposing things upon her, and who negotiated with record companies so that she could have the adequate promotion and distribution commensurate with her talent. And it's such a shame that, you know, so many decades after, the kind of Ma Rainey model, as it were, of the strong, powerful black woman beyond the cliche, you know, this is like, this is real. This is a woman who was very, I mean, she was very poor and uneducated, but incredibly intelligent and astute, not to mention talented. But somehow that kind of fell away in the subsequent decades. And I think if we're talking about hopefully real, effective and lasting change, then it's just very important that when people hear a name like Ma Rainey, they think, okay, a woman who did a range of things, a black woman who was proactive, not a black woman who was submissive, not a black woman who could only sing, but a black woman who could do this whole range of things as well. And I think the question of, as you can tell, this is a particular interest in me, women writers and producers. You know, it's not something which is discussed. It's not something which is generally in the public consciousness. So if we, again, if you want a historical example, we think of Aretha, Aretha Franklin, who's obviously very topical now because of the recent film. As soon as you say Aretha, people say the Queen of Soul, you know, the greatest voice, one of the greatest voices, etc., which is obviously accurate. Aretha was a kick-ass pianist. She was an outstanding musician, and she was also a great composer. She wrote some great songs. But again, we've got these overriding images and cliches and stereotypes which deflect, which detract from this really important information. I'd like a young songwriter, a young Black woman coming into the industry now to say, okay, Aretha is one of my role models because she wrote great songs, as well as having this heaven-sent voice. Because she could lead a band, because she could play the piano really well, because she had jazz chops as well as soul and gospel.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
And I think that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I think, you know, historically speaking, if we're talking about a context, I think that's really it. I would just to summarize it very quickly. I think there is this hidden history and this obscure information, or this information which has been maybe cynically buried, which needs to be uncovered and put forward, so that the future generations coming into the industry really can see themselves in much broader terms, as opposed to seeing themselves as somebody who's going to be the voice for today, have their 5 minutes or their couple of years, as Kwame was saying, and then they'll be knocked off the conveyor belt and somebody else will come along.
Yeah, I hear that. And, you know, not long-winded at all, Kevin, lots of really interesting things there. And I think, you know, one of the phrases I really picked up from that was, you know, a narrative that's buried, because actually just before we came on this call, we were talking about how the fact that, you know, the Gen Z do not know some of this history. They don't know where this legacy has come from. And I also, you know, I guess I would just add to that. I caught the film. I actually saw the show at the National Theatre with Sharon D. Clarke, and I recommend to anyone, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. I would also just add to that as an aside, one of the few times I've been in the National Theatre and seen a lot of people that look like me in the audience as well as on the stage. Isn't that very telling? Thank you, Kevin. And that really leads very nicely on to Kienda. Your specialisms are entertainment, law, and business. Are Black people just less business savvy? Or equally, there has to be an issue of individual vulnerability in all of this? Just coming back to what Kevin, you know, has been talking about in terms of the way careers are manipulated and people are isolated from having a control of their own careers. It's hard to go against the system and fight for your rights, right? Would you say that?
Well, I just want to say, by the way, he speaks Mandarin as well. Kienda speaks Mandarin.
Okay, got you on that.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's good, Kwame. Thank you. I think that there's a two-pronged thing here, you know, and I think it's really important to understand that number one, the industry is a machine. Let's not sort of sugarcoat it. It's a machine, like in any other kind of machine within a capitalist sort of, which has its origins in the exploitation. It's geared around making money for those people that are savvy about the business, those people that are in control. If we juxtapose that against the fact that we have always been a commodity, right, to them, you know, when they first came and met us, they saw wealth and riches and so forth and what have you, and we've always been perceived in that way. Our products, or the product of our labor, has always been seen that way. And I always look at it when I'm looking at it from a legal perspective, I always talk about this term exploitation. And in fact, actually in contracts, you'll find actually that, you know, sometimes you'll see the wording that actually is no hidden term, right? It says the record label will exploit the works of the artist. It's not there, it's not a secret. It's all about exploitation, you know. And, you know, and from that point of view, from the moment that we are perceived a certain way, and the power lies in the hands of those people that are you know, able to exploit it, there will always be that power dynamic which will see us at the bottom as exploited, extremely talented individuals. Any attempt, and you know, I think that, you know, Kevin's Ma Rainey reference is absolutely spot on. Any attempt to try and buck against that trend will always be seen as, you know, troublemaking or what have you. And that's a real problem. And you know, for Black women, all the time when I'm seeing negotiations take place, I'm seeing incredibly powerful, knowledgeable, talented, skilled, business savvy Black women who are somehow almost not recognized as being such in that negotiation process. All of their skills are not therefore then recognized in terms of their value proposition. And therein lies the beginning of the process. So the negotiations start with, you're a singer, right? And that's it. And so therefore, any, you know, from my perspective and the lens that I look through is, you know, what it says on the contracts and how the negotiation goes. I see everything that everybody has said here manifest in writing.
Wow. Okay.
At that juncture and at the point at which you have a corporate enterprise engaging somebody in terms of exploiting them. And it's all there in the paperwork. Let's face it, you know, and I always say this to people that I represent and everybody else, you know, that is the most important thing. I mean, I know that people might argue differently, but I think when you see, particularly when you're contracting with companies that aren't owned by people who look like us, you will see how they think manifested in the terms of the agreement. And that's what's led me to do the research that I'm doing at the moment, is to look at the way that terms are articulated in agreements and how they differ in relation to how those entities deal with us and how they deal with others. You asked the question about whether or not we're less savvy. And I'm just going to take that route a little bit and bring the two cores of thought together. I think there is a problem here. And there is a sense that we're not. Thankfully, I'm seeing incredible amounts of enterprise from our young Black people now. I mean, more than ever before, you know, particularly our Black women who are really, you know, at the forefront of this, you know, this whole thought process. Wozzy earlier on was talking before we went into recording about that cover that Sharice and the colleagues were on the front of. I mean, you know, it epitomizes the fact that we are in that zone. But we have had a history, and we have to face it, of being affected by the media in a sense that, you know, we see big superstars walking on stage, we see them, we hear them on records and so forth. And the way that the media is controlled is that we're constantly fed images of these people being incredibly successful and powerful and rich. And somehow or other, and I could go back and start talking about the psychological aspects of slavery and what it's sure. But this desire for immediate return and wealth has created a situation that I believe where particularly our young have focused on those images and have wanted that success, that power, what they perceive as power. And that is a kind of a smokescreen, which actually the institutions that run the sort of the capitalist money-making machine have been very happy to live with, because, and you can see it when you have a conversation with somebody about the reason why you're on the UK Music Diversity Task Force, right? Wozzy will know this experience, and Kwame, I know, is involved in similar. I said, well, what's that then? You know, there's no problem. There's all kinds of rich Black people in the music industry, because they too are blinded by the images of wealth of Jay-Z and Beyonce and everybody else.
Of course.
But so we've got this thing where we've got this programming which has potentially not allowed us to see where the real power is. But then again, we are naturally entrepreneurs. You know, we have to be all kinds of others. We've had to survive, right?
Yeah.
But you know, when we start thinking about the inventive things that we've done, you know, that our elders have done, there's huge amounts of invention, huge amounts of initiative, and huge amounts of enterprise. But it's interesting how in the realms where we're talking about real exploitation of human people, that doesn't come about. It's normally in terms of our need to survive.
Yeah, sure.
So Ma Rainey, in the situation that Kevin talks about, was so astute that she recognized that it was a machine, no doubt, you know, intuitively, and that there were people who were ready to tell her what to do with her life. And immediately said, no, this is going to have to change. There's no way that I'm going to go down that route. I am me. I'm not just the product. I am the producer of the product. I am the controller of the product. The product exists because I created it. It's my vision, it's my spirit and everything else. So I think that for me, it's important to try and sell the vision and try and promote the idea that it's not what's on stage that's powerful. It's not who's in the studio that's powerful. It's who's sitting in the boardrooms.
I hear that.
And I one of the things I would also say is that, you know, my area of specialism is intellectual property.
Okay.
So my thought process is like, when you write something, you create property. So I'm not surprised that record labels constantly talk down the writing aspect of Black artists, because that's about control. Yep. It's a control mechanism, right? They understand property. That's their manifest. They created this world of intellectual property. They're from the Western classical traditional basis of the thinking of monopolizing something like music was alien to us as a concept. Wow. So if they recognize that as being right, okay, now you create something. Hell no, they're not necessarily. Hence the reason why so many Black women have gone through this experience of being approached by white young dance DJs to be the front singer or the front singer of a band, but their abilities to write is not recognized, because of course they write, they control, they have power, they can negotiate publishing, they can have rights and all of these other things. And I think we have to recognize that we have to tell people that the power is not in the success of the performer. The power really lies with having that aligned with the business.
Thank you, Kienda. There's again so much in there, and I hear all of that. And actually, for me, that now segues nicely to Wozzy. Wozzy, one of the biggest headlines from the report, though no surprise to me, is that women are the hardest done by in terms of pay disparity. According to the Blim report, Black women creators report earning £1,026 on a month on average. This is less than £1,282 earned by white women creators and £1,225 per month earnings in the industry reported by Black men. That makes for tough reading for me and highlights ongoing issues of discrimination. I'd really like to know your thoughts on that and why this is an ongoing problem for both Black women music creators and industry professionals. I think Kienda's picked up quite a lot of that there, but it'd be great to hear what your thoughts are on that, Wozzy.
Yeah, I think that you know, in reading that information, that as a Black female creator, professional, that I would earn 19% less than my counterparts is where I think when we look at how somebody recognizes. So yes, I was a singer, but actually I cut that part of my career off very early within the creative industries, when I recognized actually you earned more money if you wrote the songs, you earned more money if you organized and were the production manager or the event manager, or you did your own business. So, you know, you kind of catch on early, because I think my first ever entrepreneurial spark was actually in secondary school, where I ran a drama club for the seniors and the juniors. And I was the cover teacher for my drama teacher. The head teacher would come and get me when she was off, and I would run that program. And I said, okay, let me set up a drama club then. And I set 2 drama clubs up. So that spark in me was 17 years old. And I think early, as much as my love for music and performing as an actress and all of those things, early on in my career, by the time I was 23, I recognized that actually there was more in this business to be the owner of something than there was to be the one up on the stage.
Oh, yes.
And taking that journey. But what happens along that journey, and what I'm seeing here, that people had to diversify their incomes in order to sustain that, and can't just be the writer, the creator, because they've also got to have the side job. Sometimes it's not even in the music business. It's some other random job in a bar or wherever it may be, in a restaurant, as I've had friends do. And I know Sharon D. Clark from way back from the Albany days, from the 80s. I know Mary Pierce and her writing and her creators, not just a vocalist, but an amazing writer, and how working with those top producers and putting out that stuff, not recognized for their contribution. And I think it's a point of which it wasn't until maybe the 90s, maybe the noughties, of that recognition of a female. When we think of people like Paulette Long OBE, a female could be up in the echelons. I met Paulette in 1999 and got her to come and talk on a music business conference that we were doing at the Albany, and bring an artist that she was working with, and that where people understood that we were business savvy. We weren't just the singers, the dancers, the actresses. And you touched on it, Kwame, and so have you, Kevin. It's how ornamental we see. I was very slim and skinny then, and all the rest of it, and coming from the 70s and the 80s, and people kind of go, oh, but you get up there and sing, I go, no, actually, I want to write the play. I actually want to write the lyrics. That's what I want to do. I want to production manage it. So when the pay disparity, it actually, I think for women, generally for women, it goes back to the 50s and beyond, because we were homemakers, we weren't career people.
Sure.
People didn't recognize females as a business women, in the way that we have some recognition now, that yes, we've got our own businesses, whether it's a social enterprise, a profit-making business, or whether we're charitable because we want more women to come through. And certainly in part of setting up the MIDI Music Company, what's always stayed part of our main aim is to develop the technical skills of young women. So no, not the singing, the technology, that young women can be producers and creators of engineers, and the other side of the business. But when we look at the history for women generally, before we focus on women of colour, the history of women generally is not as businesswoman.
Yeah.
So we're still on catch up as women, full stop, from those days and that heritage, because men were already earning. So the salary scale was already up here. Now, when we look at women of colour, we certainly weren't in the positions that other white women were in those roles. And if you're lucky, you might be the secretary or the PA or the receptionist within the music industry. You're certainly, when we're talking about the professionals, you were certainly not the head of A&R. You were not the head of the label. You were not the head of PR. You weren't in those positions. And that's what we've got climbing up with not only those involved with Black Lives in Music, but the All Black Coalition, BAFA UK. We are recognising and trying to inspire the females to be the owners of, the managers of, the directors of, the executives of, and to also to try, which is, throughout my career, and obviously most of my career is implanted in charitable organisations to create these pathways. And those organisations don't always have the finances. I know I'm underpaid. I've been told when I worked in Italy by people who've wanted me to come and work out there and said, look, you're worth £1 million to me. And you go, oh, am I? And then you go, of course, my contacts, my networks, my knowledge, my history, how deep I can go, that recognition. But the money doesn't always match up. Well, we know it doesn't match up.
It doesn't, no.
And I think because we come from the village, whether you are from the African or Caribbean diaspora, we come, the DNA is that of a village. We're trying to bring up our families. That doesn't have to be bloodlines. We want to give praise and thanks to whoever it may be that's rising up to recognise and to celebrate their success. Because this is where the impact of slavery, it was about making us the diaspora, the divisive way of separating people and batting dark skin against light skin. All of this is part of one's DNA. And if the young people of today, those who are the entrepreneurs who are doing all the stuff that they're amazing work that they're doing right now, what they have to, whether it's Galdem, whether it's whoever it is that's doing all of these amazing things that are popping through, what they have to remember is that, yes, the elders have laid a pathway for you to
I hear that.
have this level of success to be able to build the house that you are building. But we are still laying that pathway, because until you can walk into a boardroom, whether it be a record label or a publisher, and remember, where's all the money, people? Publishing. Until you can walk into those boardrooms and actually see yourself, the people who are making decisions, those who are in charge, head of HR, the people who are actually saying what salary rates there are for people and the recognition of what you bring. I think that it's certainly, I mean, I do it in my freelance world. I put a value on what I'm offering, and I say, well, this is my fee. And then sometimes people, oh, we didn't really budget for that. I said, oh, well, never mind. If you haven't got a budget, let me know, because I've got other work to do, and that is my fee. Because
I love that.
There's a point where you actually have to go, I do bring value. We do bring value, Black females, of our knowledge and the history and growing up in houses with all this music. And actually also don't tell me what kind of things I can manage. All right. Don't look at me and see a Black woman and say, well, it must be this type of music. My grandmother was an Elvis Presley fan and she had such a range of music.
Sure.
From country all the way to the greats, you know, everything. My mum was Bob Marley, just all this music. So my love, Porgy and Bess, my love for music, right? Gershwin Brothers, all of that. My love for music is like really broad. So therefore, what I might want to manage, what you're going to invest in is me managing whatever I like. It may not be Black music as you see it. Or, you know, right now I'm managing an 8-piece ska reggae band, Train Ska Brassica. They're all white working class youth, 8 of them, from the manor. But what do I love about them? They're tight. They're great at what they do. And actually, I you know, working with Yusuf Days, who's a friend of one of the sax players, Rory, he's the one who asked me, because I manage United Vibrations. And Yusuf Days is now doing his career. And as we all know, you know, nominated for an Ivors Academy. And these are the kind of young people that are coming in home. I know their parents. I know their journeys. You're trying to understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, when I'm managing, I always say to them, when I'm not your manager, this is what you need from your manager. This is what you need to know. This is what you can ask for. This is how you bring Yusuf, one time in this very office, your bag of receipts to sort out, because I'm making you register self-employed. I'm going to show you what you need to do so that when you earn your money, nobody is coming to get that money, especially the tax man, that you will know how to manage that so that you are a business yourself. And you understand what that is. So I want to manage whatever I want to manage. If you want to invest in me to do what I love doing, don't tell me styles or music. But this, the pay, you know, to close really, the whole pay thing, it's not a surprise. As I said, it's about historical female roles and coming into the world of work, really. You've got to say in the last 70 to 80 years, women have positions of standing, and especially if we're talking about women of color, Black women, then hey, are we 100 years or 150 years behind?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I just want to pick up on one item of that, Wozzy, which really resonated with me, which is value. And so Kwame, if I can just bring you in on this, there's a report from the Black Music Action Coalition suggested there was a resistance in the industry to sharing details about artist contracts, pay rates, employee demographics and salaries. In the interests of transparency and fairness, do you agree that this has to change? I mean, it's almost a rhetorical question, but I've got to put it to you.
Yes. It's got to. It has to. Come on, man. It's like, it's too long. I'm sitting here in 2021 having these discussions. It's like, it's got to change. It has to. You know, look, there are many sayings. Unless one is free, we're not all free. All of that. We you know, the simple truth is that's it. Getting in whatever level that you're at, sharing as much information, you're not going to lose. And I know we've been hardwired and programmed to think that actually by doing that, somebody else is going to get in on a patch. That patch is non-existent. It wasn't even for us. Like, we made new patches. And on that point, I want to even, you know, there are a lot of people. Irene Agbonte, right? To me, trailblazer. Camille, trailblazer. You know, you probably see them both starring in High Life on Channel 4. You know, Ricky Blue, Glyn Aitken, Shah Grant, her rise at Def Jam, her rise, because it's nowhere near over. Nadu and Whitney from the Zoo Agency. These are all people that are literally, I'm more than proud of. I see the strides that they're making, and I'm just like, yeah, Grace LaDoja, come on. She's incredible. Her and the stuff she's done with Skep, and Boy Better Know. People who held out and basically, loads of them own their own masters. You know, Danai, Mavunga, Afro House. What does she do? She does Afro Paradise parties with DJ Net Tizzle. Again, in control of their imagery, in control of their, you know, inviting. I went to one of their things the other day. They had people, DJs over, major league DJs came over from South Africa, completely organized, perfect.
But I just,
so I'm just saying, it's like, you know, we spoke earlier about us doing multiple things. Much of that, as we've all said, was almost forced upon us. But we have a knack of turning lemons into lemonade. You know, and actually finding new businesses like out of nothing. I always say, you know what, you look at something like hip hop and you go to yourself, okay, let's look at that. Okay. When everything was stripped from, you know, from Black neighborhoods in terms of like musical equipment, etc., the expense, all of that was taken. People found a way to make 2 turntables and a microphone and turn it into a multi-billion-pound business. I'm like, that's us. That ain't.
Thank you, Kwame. And I'm picking up that vibe. And just quickly, Kienda, if I can just tap you for a quick answer here. My good friend and co-founder of Black Lives in Music, Cherise Beaumont, sent me a lovely link for a news article yesterday, suggesting only 13 of the 100 largest UK listed employers have revealed their ethnicity pay gaps, sparking fresh calls for the government to make reporting of racial earnings disparities mandatory. Again, do you think this is something that should be adopted in the music industry? I'm guessing that's a rhetorical question, but just give me a quick answer on that if you can.
Do you want the bell? Do you want the bell? You can take the bell.
Pass it round.
No, absolutely. I think it's absolutely high time. You know, I mean, it's one of those things that's really important for us to think about in terms of, you know, historically, whenever we're talking about campaigning around issues and stuff, you know, the system that we ask to do these things is nearly always compliant when it comes to something which they're comfortable with. And that they know, you know, but the disparity in race is something that they know is a problem. We all know it's a problem. We almost don't need a survey. In fact, we don't need a survey.
We don't need it. We don't need it. We don't need it.
But you see, the thing is, and I've always said this, in all of there's been a whole plethora of Black music industry organizations over the years. Black Music Industry Association, Cobra, you know, there's been a whole load of them that have come, and all of them we've all talked about, and I'm hoping that things are changing now. And in fact, actually, I know, because I'm seeing your research by, you know, Black Music Coalition, by the UK Diversity Task Force, and by yourselves. And one of the things that we've always responded with is, well, where's the evidence? You know, and anytime you start talking about these things in forum before, you always get this kind of response that will be like, well, show us the evidence.
Oh, yes.
And we never really had the evidence before, but now I'm seeing a really consistent focus around research, bringing the empirical evidence to the fore that shows that there are problems. So yes, we do need particularly government, to take action on the pay gap, the ethnic pay gap. But we know the answers. We know what's going to be there.
Yes.
So I almost suggest this, because we know the answer, let's begin our work now. We'll get the answer and it'll come, but we're not going to wait for somebody to come and do the work, right? Because that's silly, that's foolishness. To just sit down and wait for something that we know and able to go back and say, see, I told you. And the reason why also we ought to think is that they know also, right? They know the truth also, let's face it, right? They're not sugarcoat it. They don't like it. So BMG, for example, we talk about it in contract terms, like in December last year, did something unprecedented, right? They decided that they were going to release information that they had found that 4 of the labels that they had acquired catalogs for had operated in a discriminatory way when offering contracts to artists, to Black artists. And so they disclosed this information to everybody. I must admit, when I saw that, I thought, wow, like seriously? And they were saying to everybody that we must encourage others to do the same. You know, it's brilliant, you know, that you must do this. But the fear of what they know would be revealed, and that is that contracts that are offered to artists, we talk about pay gap, and I look at pay gap through the lens of contracts with artists particularly, and not ignoring the employment within the power structures that are the labels. I think that's another issue which we're dealing with in the task force. But I think that if we start to look at that, I can see clear evidence of where advance offers are lower. Kwame will know about this. You know, you're constantly having this battle of looking at, you know, I'm a white rock band from Brighton. They got offered a contract and huge amounts more. I have real living evidence of the fact that, you know, they're getting paid, were offered a significantly higher amount. But it's not only necessarily in that. We need the government also, when we're talking about pay gap, when we're talking about labels disclosing this, not just about the people who they employ, but how they contract. The kind of terms that they put into place. It's not just about money as well, by the way, it's also about rights, ownership and control of rights, length of period that they have to exploit these rights, and all of these things. And if we look at all of those things in the round, definitely, we absolutely must be able to provide some empirical evidence of the pay differences, because it's glaringly obvious and it's a real horrible thing. And to be honest with you, you know, change comes about when people see something which is indisputable. So we see George Floyd killed on television in high res. You then started to see people start to even talk about change. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because it was glaringly obvious. If we provide them with the empirical evidence that this is happening and it's there in black and white, maybe there'll be change.
Thank you. It's just very shocking. That's where we have to get to try and stimulate some thoughts. We're desperately running out of time. It's been just amazing and quite inspirational listening to everyone. Kevin, if I can just bring you in for the last few minutes here. So, you know, as Kienda said, you know, there's a lot of information about, there's some really hard-hitting facts that are generated by the Blim report, but reports have been and gone before. As I mentioned, there's a genuine issue of representation in the jazz media, not only in terms of ethnicity, but as importantly, gender too. Equally, there's an imbalance of imaging content in regard to Black artists, which suggests a problem as well. One anecdotal comment from the Blim report went along the lines of, I think gender disparity is a compounding issue in relation to race. The bias is against women in radio play and PR coverage, for examples. Could I just get a couple of quick thoughts from you about that?
Well, I'd say that you have to look at the amount of inspirational Black women who've actually come through in the last decade or so and have really made an impact, who have spoken out against that very discrimination. But nonetheless, if you think, okay, we've just had Nabaya Garcia nominated for a Mercury Music Prize. The year before that, Cassie Kanoshi, the City Ensemble. There are several other very, very important, very talented young Black women in jazz who are making great strides forward. Most importantly, you have somebody like Janine Irons, who's part of Tomorrow's Warriors, providing a huge amount of support, nurturing and developing to come back to make things full circle. It's something that Kwame talked about in his opening statement, this very, very crucial, this fundamental question of development and guidance. And with somebody like Janine Irons working with Gary Crosby at Tomorrow's Warriors.
Oh yes.
And, you know, we have a lot to be proud of, and
Absolutely.
and a lot to be hopeful about. But the other person who I'd mentioned very quickly, who I feel is an absolute role model and the epitome of the Black woman who is incredibly creative and visionary, and who's had the conviction and the absolute self-belief to stick to her own guns and resist any kind of industry pigeonholing, is Carleen Anderson.
Oh yes. Yeah,
and to me, she remains a supreme example of a Black woman who is multifaceted, multi-talented, and willing to pursue her own vision and resist any compromises. And if you look at the work that she's done in the last few years, I mean, Young Disciples are a seminal band, which everybody knows, but the Cage Street Memorial Project that Carleen did was just extraordinary. The woman has astounding talent, and she's managed to keep her artistic integrity over decades. And she's put a lot into music education as well. She's nurtured many artists over the years. So I think, as difficult as the situation may be, the points that Kienda, Wozzy, and Kwame have all made are absolutely resonant with me. I mean, it's very real, as Kienda said. This is empirical evidence, you can't deny it. Nonetheless, we have to take heart from the existence of these inspirational women who are out there and who are leading the charge. And I think somebody like Carleen is a prime example of a woman whose story should be told more often, a woman who should be held up in the full glare of the media, so that everybody can look at those achievements and say, well, actually, I can go down that path as well. I don't have to be reduced to one thing. I can follow in the footsteps of a Carleen Anderson.
Thanks for that, Kevin. Very, very, very salient points there that I hope everyone's picked up on this call. Those last words bring to an end today's discussion. It was beyond really interesting to hear the views of all of our guests today. I'm absolutely mesmerized by the comments that have been made today, and I will be going away and thinking about them. There's been an overwhelming message from today's session. There's clearly a lack of effective support and a real need for a strong strategy from within the sector to accelerate change. In fact, it sounds like there's no real desire, and we can understand that for all the reasons given. Change is long overdue. We must level the playing field and provide better opportunities throughout the talent pipeline. It's been both an honor and a privilege to be on the call with our guests today. My thanks to Wozzy, Kwame, Kevin, and Kienda, and my thanks to you for joining us. My thanks also to Sound City, Guest House, and of course, Tunecore. I hope you've enjoyed the session, and please do join me again for another of these discussions in association with Tunecore. To find out more about Black Lives in Music and find out more about the report, please visit our website. That's www.blim.org.uk. And I do invite you and encourage you actively, please find out more about the amazing work of our guests today. They are legends. And for me, I can't say enough. It's a real honor for me to be on this call. So thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks and goodbye.